Carter extended his hand with quiet confidence. "I don't shake hands with employees," Victoria Sterling said coolly, stepping back as though the very gesture offended her. An uneasy silence filled the Sterling Dynamics boardroom. 5 executives exchanged subtle, approving smiles while Daniel lowered his hand without a word. At 42, the impeccably composed entrepreneur had endured moments like this before, but something in his steady gaze hinted that today would be different. "I understand," he replied, voice calm and deliberate, adjusting the watch on his wrist with a move no one could quite read. Victoria, CEO and heiress of the Sterling Empire, gave him a glance heavy with condescension. She mistook his simple attire for lack of stature, unaware it was a calculated choice. "So you're the consultant our investors sent," she said, the title almost an insult. "Let's keep this brief. People like me have demanding schedules." Hours earlier, Daniel had arrived exactly on time, driving an ordinary car and dressed with deliberate modesty. The receptionist made him wait 40 minutes, and security guards passed by repeatedly, sizing him up. Every slight was quietly noted. What no one knew was that Daniel Carter controlled Carter Global Investments, a fund managing over $60 billion, and he was considering a $4 billion stake in Sterling Dynamics. "Our numbers speak for themselves," Victoria continued, flipping through reports without a glance in his direction. "I doubt we need to explain complex strategies to someone who might not follow them." Daniel remained silent, every dismissive word carefully stored away. In his pocket, a discreet recorder captured it all. When her presentation ended, she asked, "Any questions?" checking her watch as though his presence was a burden. "Just one," Daniel said evenly. "Do you believe this attitude reflects the values of a company seeking partners?" Victoria laughed, sharing a knowing look with her team. "Values? Mr. Carter, our only concern is profit. I trust your superiors understand that." Daniel allowed himself the faintest smile. None of them realized the secret he held, or how quickly arrogance can collapse. Moments later, he interrupted again. "Those revenue figures don't match your public filings. There's a discrepancy of about 300 million. The room went still. Victoria's polite mask faltered. "Do you have experience analyzing companies of our caliber?" "Some," Daniel replied calmly, letting the understatement hang. Her vice president leaned forward, smug. "Mr. Carter, just tell us what you need so we can wrap this up." They had no idea that the man they were dismissing was the very person deciding their future. Daniel Carter had met this kind of arrogance before. At 18, working as an intern at a small Chicago brokerage, he'd watched wealthy clients treat black employees as though they were invisible. At 25, pitching his first independent investment idea, he'd been shown the door in 3 different offices before finishing a single sentence. Every slight became fuel. While others quit, Daniel studied 18 hours a day, absorbed financial reports like poetry, and honed a market intuition that seemed almost otherworldly. Now seated across from Sterling Dynamics leadership, he adjusted his watch for the 3rd time, a subtle motion that masked the calculation behind his calm. "I'm curious about the company's culture," he said evenly, "its core values." Victoria Sterling gave a short, amused laugh. "Values? Our only value is excellence, and we recognize excellence when it's in the room." Her eyes swept him from head to toe, which, clearly, it isn't. Muted chuckles rippled around the table. Daniel stayed composed. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. A message from his chief of staff, Marcus. "Phase 2. Ready when you are." Sensing her team's approval, Victoria pressed harder. "You see, Mr. Carter, a company like ours demands refinement, education, the right circles, connections where real decisions are made." She strolled to the panoramic window overlooking the city's financial district. "It must be difficult for someone like you to grasp the complexity of what we do." "Nothing personal, just reality." Daniel nodded slightly. "I understand your view," he said. "It's interesting how often people mistake inherited privilege for earned skill." The remark hit home. Victoria spun, her face tight with anger. How dare you? My family built this company from the ground up, with an initial loan of $50 million from your grandfather's trust fund, Daniel replied softly. Public record, by the way. James Morrison, the vice president, slammed a fist on the table. You don't speak to Mrs. Sterling that way. Who do you think you are? For a heartbeat, Daniel let a glint of power show through his calm. Someone who knows the real value of things, Mr. Morrison. Victoria drew a slow breath, forcing a smile. Very well. If you want to play auditor, let's give you something to audit. She pressed the intercom. Jennifer, bring me the Meridian Project reports. All of them. The confidential ones too, ma'am, came the assistant's voice. Especially the confidential ones, Victoria said with a smirk. Our consultant seems to have plenty of time. What she didn't know was that Daniel had already secured the Meridian documents, legally through open investor channels. He knew the project was 3 years late, $600 million over budget, and riddled with mismanagement. While they waited, Victoria turned to Morrison and said loudly, Amazing how some people don't realize when they're out of their depth. Daniel allowed himself the faintest smile. Just 6 blocks away, 15 elite analysts, graduates of Harvard, MIT, and Wharton, waited for his call. Only yesterday, the CEO of Goldman Sachs had phoned to ask his advice on a $12 billion acquisition. Every dismissive glance, every smug remark was being recorded by the discreet device in his pocket, evidence enough to shatter reputations in a single news cycle. Victoria finally slid a thick stack of documents across the table as if handing down a burden. Daniel's phone vibrated again. A message from his CFO, urgent meeting canceled. Lead investor delaying the $4 billion decision. No reason given. For just an instant, Victoria's confident mask cracked. Pros never arrive alone, Victoria muttered, glaring at Daniel as though he were personally responsible for every problem in her morning. Any difficulties? Daniel asked, his voice calm enough to be infuriating. Nothing you need to worry about, she snapped, fingers flying across her keyboard as she fired off a terse reply. Complex global investment matters, the sort she believed required an elite pedigree, far beyond someone like him. 6 blocks away, Marcus Thompson, Daniel's trusted partner for 8 years, was quietly setting the plan in motion. With a University of Chicago finance degree and razor-sharp risk instincts, Marcus had learned from Daniel that the best strategies are patient and precise. Phase 1 complete, he texted, watching Sterling dynamics from his office window. Contacts at Goldman and JP Morgan, alerted. $4 billion investment on hold pending review. Their alliance had been forged in moments like this. Years earlier, Marcus had been a star analyst at a top Wall Street firm, repeatedly overlooked despite stellar results. Daniel, already running a growing investment outfit, had watched a senior partner humiliate Marcus during a high-stakes presentation. Afterward, Daniel quietly approached him. I know talent when I see it, he'd said, and I know when talent is being ignored. Marcus never forgot. Together, they had built Carter Global Investments into a financial powerhouse, a quiet rebellion against the systemic obstacles they both understood all too well. Back in the conference room, Victoria slid a thick folder across the table. Here are the Meridian Project files you were so eager to see, she said with a hint of venom. I'm sure our advanced methodology will be challenging. Daniel opened the folder without a flicker of emotion. In 15 minutes, he uncovered 3 major accounting red flags, 2 probable cases of overbilling, and a clear breach of federal environmental rules. Interesting tactic in item 7.3, he observed, tapping a line of text. Reclassifying operating costs as research investments might work for a while, but federal auditors will notice. The silence was immediate. James Morrison shot a nervous glance at Victoria. For the first time, her confidence faltered. How did you, Morrison began, then stopped, unsettled by Daniel's precision. Experience, Daniel said evenly, continuing to scan the pages. I also noticed your reported productivity doesn't match public energy use data from the Ohio plant. roughly a 22% gap. A bead of sweat traced down Victoria's forehead. That information was supposed to be buried deep in internal records. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice losing its edge. Daniel gave a quiet smile, the kind he'd perfected over years of being underestimated. "Just someone who pays attention, Miss Sterling." Right then, her phone rang. It was her corporate attorney, Dr. Peterson, urgency clear in his tone. "Victoria, I need to speak with you immediately. The SEC has given an informal notice, possible investigation into Sterling Dynamics. Something about irregular accounting tied to the Meridian project. The details are unusually specific." Victoria's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Our books are flawless." "Apparently someone supplied highly detailed information," Peterson replied. As she tried to process the blow, Daniel sat in perfect calm. Every dismissive word, every smug gesture had bought Marcus the time he needed to complete Phase 1. Daniel Carter wasn't fueled by anger. He was a strategist, one who knew that the most decisive victories come not from rage, but from striking with surgical precision exactly where it counts. For years, Daniel Carter had gathered information on companies like Sterling Dynamics, not out of spite, but because he recognized the familiar pattern: polished public image on the surface, corruption and quiet discrimination beneath. Sterling Dynamics, with its gleaming reputation, was a house of cards, and Daniel, seated calmly in their boardroom while enduring their arrogance, was ready to bring that house down with the precision of someone who had studied every weak beam. "Everything all right?" Daniel asked lightly, watching Victoria end yet another phone call, her hand trembling. "Just routine matters," she replied, forcing a smile, but the panic in her eyes betrayed her. What she could not imagine was that the man across the table wasn't a passive target of her disdain. He was the architect of her downfall, and construction had already begun. Her phone rang again, the fourth time in 15 minutes. "Ms. Sterling," came her assistant's unsteady voice. "The financial press is calling nonstop. The Wall Street Journal is demanding a statement about allegations of discrimination." "Discrimination?" Victoria repeated, her voice climbing. "What are they talking about?" Daniel remained serene. Without a word, he tapped a single message on his phone. "Now." 6 blocks away, Marcus read it and smiled. "Phase 2, go," he told his waiting analysts. Seconds later, a 43-minute audio file was sent to 17 financial journalists, a dozen civil rights advocates, and 27 major investors. The file contained every dismissive remark, every cutting phrase from their meeting. Across newsrooms, Victoria's own voice played, "I don't shake hands with employees. People like me have important agendas. Someone like you." Victoria was still reeling when James Morrison burst in, face pale. "Victoria, we have a crisis. Recordings of you are everywhere. Damaging recordings." She turned sharply toward Daniel, suspicion flashing at last. You recorded this meeting." Daniel drew a small device from his pocket, perfectly composed. "Every word, Miss Sterling. Every gesture of contempt. Every remark you thought would stay private." "That's illegal," Morrison barked. "Actually," Daniel replied evenly, "New York is a one-party consent state. I only needed my own permission." Before anyone could speak, the desk phone erupted again. Richard Blackstone, chairman of the board, spoke with icy fury through the speaker. "Victoria, you have 5 minutes to explain why our company is all over the news for discriminatory comments. Carter Global Investments has just withdrawn a $4 billion commitment, citing ethical concerns." "Carter Global?" Victoria stammered. "Our investor was Johnson Financial." "There is no Johnson Financial," Daniel said quietly, rising for the first time. "It has always been Carter Global Investments. My company." The room fell silent. Victoria stared at him, stunned, as the reality sank in. You're Daniel Carter," she whispered. "CEO and founder of Carter Global Investments," he confirmed, placing a gold business card on the table with deliberate calm. $2 billion in assets under management," Daniel said evenly. and recognized by Forbes as one of the 50 most influential investors in the world. Morrison took the gold-edged card with shaking hands, reading the credentials aloud. Harvard Business School, former Goldman Sachs, Advisory Board, Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Daniel continued without raising his voice. For 6 months, my team evaluated Sterling Dynamics as a candidate for our largest investment of the year, $4 billion that would have made this company an undisputed industry leader. Victoria sank back into her chair, the weight of the moment crushing the arrogance she'd worn like armor. 6 months, Daniel repeated, of watching how you treat smaller suppliers, employees from different backgrounds, and visitors who don't fit your picture of success. Today was the final test, an assessment of your ethical leadership. The phone rang again. "Miss Sterling," said Dr. Elizabeth Warren, Director of Corporate Ethics for the National Association of Technology Companies. "Our board has unanimously voted to suspend Sterling Dynamics from all association events pending an independent investigation into discriminatory practices." Victoria set the phone down, hands trembling. This will destroy our reputation." "Your reputation," Daniel corrected gently, "was destroyed by your own words and actions. I merely documented the truth you reveal when you think no one important is watching." Morrison's phone buzzed with an alert. His voice cracked as he read it. "Sterling racism is trending on social media. Over 200,000 posts in 2 hours. Our stock is down 18%. 3 major investors have already pulled out." Daniel watched in silence as the realization settled over them. In a single morning, Victoria had lost the company's largest prospective investment, her public image, and her standing in the industry. "Why?" she whispered at last, her voice stripped of pride. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel walked to the window, the city skyline gleaming below. "Because companies like yours keep a system alive where talent is judged by skin color, social background, or outward appearance. Because people in power use that power to humiliate those they consider beneath them. And because business must be better than this. Sometimes change only happens when an example is made." Victoria tried one last plea. "We can work this out. Make a deal. Implement reforms." "The changes you need," Daniel said, turning toward the door, "can't be bought or negotiated. They have to come from leaders who truly understand the value of every person." He paused at the threshold. "I didn't record this meeting to destroy you. I recorded it so you'd have to face who you really are. What you do next will decide whether Sterling Dynamics survives or becomes another cautionary tale of arrogance toppling an empire." Daniel left the room. Outside, reporters were already gathering. On social media, #JusticeForDaniel surged as thousands shared their own stories of workplace discrimination. Sterling Dynamics' fall had taken barely 2 hours. 6 months later, Daniel Carter stood at the window of his new Manhattan office on the 52nd floor. The sweeping skyline was a far cry from the cramped space where he'd once struggled to be taken seriously. Carter Global Investments had grown exponentially since that day, proof that precision and principle can rewrite the rules of power. The video of Daniel's confrontation with Victoria had exploded online, over 8 million views and counting, turning him into a national symbol of the fight for fairness in business. Invitations to speak poured in daily from universities, corporations, and global organizations. "Investment proposals are up 40% since April," Marcus reported as he stepped into the office with a thick stack of papers. 17 companies are asking for our ethical audit before they close major deals." Daniel allowed himself a small, thoughtful smile. The irony was not lost on him. Victoria had tried to question his ability to evaluate companies, and now the world sought him out precisely for that skill. Carter Global had set a new market standard, investments granted only to companies that could prove their ethics. "And Sterling Dynamics?" Daniel asked, though he already knew the answer. "Filed for bankruptcy last week," Marcus said quietly. "Victoria lost everything, the Hamptons estate, the yacht, even her Manhattan apartment. She's staying with her sister in Connecticut. Daniel felt no triumph in the news. His goal had never been personal destruction. It was to create a system where discrimination carried real consequences. Sterling Dynamics' collapse was a warning to every boardroom. Prejudice comes with the highest price. The phone rang. Dr. Williams, Dean of Columbia University, spoke warmly on the line. "Daniel, we'd like you to give the inaugural lecture next semester. Topic: Business Ethics and Social Responsibility. The students can't wait to hear your perspective." After hanging up, Daniel paused, reflecting on how far he'd come. Just 3 years earlier, he'd struggled to get meetings with small investors. Now, leading universities competed for his insight, and business schools around the world were studying his firm's ethical auditing model. Marcus joined him by the window. "You know she's tried to reach you, right, Victoria? 17 messages asking to talk." Daniel nodded. He'd heard every plea, the voice of a woman who finally understood the cost of her arrogance. But some lessons, he knew, could only be learned through consequences that could not be undone. "I got an interesting call today," Marcus added. "Johnson & Associates wants to implement our diversity protocol across all of its international branches. 43 countries, Daniel. 43, following a standard born from that single meeting at Sterling." Outside, the Manhattan skyline glowed against the evening sky. The transformation that began in one tense conference room had rippled across continents. Europe, Asia, South America. Corporations everywhere were adopting the Carter Protocols, strict guidelines guaranteeing opportunity regardless of race, gender, or social background. What had started as one man's quiet stand had become a global shift in how business measured true success. What began as a single strategy to expose discrimination had grown into a worldwide movement. Daniel crossed the office to his desk, where a framed photo showed his team of 50, an accomplished, diverse group of analysts who embodied the very talent companies like Sterling Dynamics once overlooked. Every hire was its own quiet victory over a system that had tried to limit him. "Remember that day?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the small plaque on the wall engraved with the date of the confrontation with Victoria. "I do," Daniel said. "Back then, I thought we were just documenting another case of bias, but we proved something bigger. The best answer to prejudice isn't anger, it's excellence. It's building something so extraordinary that those who tried to diminish us can't even imagine it." The door opened, and Jennifer, his new executive assistant, announced the next meeting. A group of young Black and Latino entrepreneurs from the mentoring program Daniel had launched with a share of the firm's profits. As they entered, Daniel remembered his own early struggles, talented and determined, yet facing barriers no one would admit existed. Now he was the bridge others could cross. "Mr. Carter," said Maria, a 24-year-old founder of an educational tech startup, "I just wanted to thank you for the seed funding. Our company is already valued at $2 million. Daniel smiled, recalling their first meeting only 6 months earlier, when 16 investors had rejected her with familiar excuses about lack of experience and market fit. "Your success proves that talent and determination outlast prejudice," he told her. "All you needed was someone to recognize it." When the entrepreneurs left, hope and new resources in hand, Daniel reflected on what victory truly meant. Victoria Sterling had lost a company. He had gained a chance to change the world. Marcus stepped forward with one last update. "Forbes wants you on the cover of their special issue on ethical leadership," he said. Headline: "The Man Who Turned Humiliation into Revolution." Daniel shook his head with a quiet smile. His story was never about personal recognition. It was about creating opportunities for others. His greatest achievement wasn't the billions under management, but the hundreds of careers launched and the thousands of minds inspired to reject the limits of bias. As the sun set over Manhattan, Daniel looked out at the city that had once seemed too hostile for someone like him. Now every light represented possibility, every skyscraper a reminder that he had reshaped the landscape. Victoria Sterling had tried to define his place in the world. Instead, Daniel redefined the possibilities for everyone who would follow. The greatest revenge, he had learned, wasn't destroying those who doubted him. It was building something so remarkable that their limitations no longer mattered, turning every no into the foundation for an even greater yes. If this story of transformation and perseverance moved you, be sure to subscribe for more true tales of resilience, because real victory isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about surpassing them so completely that they become irrelevant in the light of what you've built.